Hello, thank you for joining us for today's discussion drive chat, data mining, ownership, and more, the community-based perspective. My name is Nadia Bodkin, and I'm a rare disease experience professional born with three rare genetic conditions myself. In addition to co-founding the rare advocacy movement, in the past, I have worked in the field of digital health and community-based insight collection and found success to be contingent on addressing the concerns of the people in the community that the digital platform aims to serve, which is why I am so excited for today's timely discussion. So today I have the honor of moderating a discussion drive session with four rare disease experience experts, two of which are community based and two of which are advocacy based. So today we have Danielle Holler and Kadeen Robinson, two community based rare disease experience professionals. And representing the community focused advocacy landscape, we have Don Ireland, president of CDH International, and Lynn Wilson, vice president of myositis support and understanding. In the interest of time, I like to ask Don the first question. Social listening is the process of collecting data from the social media platforms and other online community forums in the context of collecting data to obtain insights on various disease specific and even non disease specific community dynamics. What is your perspective on industry stakeholders analyzing your community's insights from community online discussions?
Well, it is definitely a new frontier when it comes to social media and data protection. I know many of us have had Facebook suddenly show ads for something that we talked about in our households with our phones off, and all of a sudden, there's an ad for our favorite food or a car that we were talking about or something completely just abstract that just pops up. And so the thought of our medical information being used in the same way and collected the same way is terrifying. Our medical information is so incredibly private, as it should be, and to worry about technology listening in on our conversations, but also being a part of platforms that also listen in on our conversations, listen into our chat rooms, the discussions that we have on private messages, the Facebook groups for our organizations where families and patients share their medical information freely because they assume everything is confidential, and it's not. And so we've become this currency instead of humans, and it's very scary. And so a lot of organization leaders have had to learn how to navigate this new world and keep everything HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, and learn technology that we didn't have to learn 5, 10 years ago. And so it's made our jobs a lot harder to keep these patients and their data protective. And so I think we're learning as we go. I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and a lot of people are going to be moving away from social networks just to protect themselves.
Thank you, Don. Lynn, what is your perspective on industry stakeholders analyzing your community's insights from community online discussions?
I'd call it lurking, and it's very disrespectful to the community. And it also, to me, is sloppy science. This is a lazy way of trying to reach the community to get the data and the experiences that you hear from the people in the community. And I want to give just a little bit background on MSU because we're a small organization. And by 2015, when we incorporated, and today, we have over 10 or 11,000 people across our platform, our organization community on social media. And our culture is around a place of safety, support, where the message, what is said there stays there. Because we talk about all the range of emotions that you feel with this disease and how it affects your life. And we want that place to be safe, a place where people who feel isolated can come and feel respected and valued, and they're not lonely anymore. So with that, we set some guidelines in place because we were aware of what Facebook is all about. It keeps changing the rules every day, and they never tell you what they're doing. So we set some guidelines about how we allow people into our groups. And by no means are we gatekeepers, but we're protectors for our community. And there's three things that we try to do to protect our community from this intrusion. One is that the people that come into our community are vetted with some questions to allow us to determine if they have myositis. It's private. It's open only to patients and caregivers. Number two, it's a safe place to be because there shouldn't be anybody else there other than the patients. There's no judgment. We all respect the conversations. We try to maintain some rules around bullying. And there's the social contract, which is the trust between MSU and the community that we will do everything that we can do to protect them. And in the confines of something like Facebook, this is about all we can do is to set those kinds of rules. And we've had many instances where doctors and industry officials will try to come in and we won't let them in. You know, they have to be accepted in. And what we will just kindly tell them that no, this is a safe place for support. There's a time and place for collecting community insights, but a support group is not it. There are other options like focus groups or diary studies or one-on-one interviews, which we're happy to collaborate with industry on. But our Facebook groups and our social media are all private to people.
Thank you. That's such valuable insight. It's something that a lot of industry members have a difficult time accepting.
Yeah.
So, as advocacy leaders, what type of features and agreements must a digital health platform have already in place to make you feel comfortable enough to bring your community into the platform?
I don't think there are any that would make us comfortable enough, where there really aren't. We created our own 10 years ago. Maybe it was 13 years ago, about the same time Facebook came around. And we took old bulletin board software and put it on our own server and hired a HIPAA specialist to monitor and make sure everything was protected and private. And we used that software to allow the families to post their stories. They have an option to make it private or public. They have private conversations in different forums. The doctors are allowed on the public part. We vet everyone who joins. We're allowed to adjust their questions. And actually we turn the forum membership form into a charity membership form. We don't charge membership for families, but this is how we vet people. You know, as a full page form, you know, tell us about your child's diagnosis. When were they diagnosed? Tell us about the congenital diaphragmatic hernia. How severe was it? A little bit of family history right there. So we know who they are. And we can also log their IP addresses for security. So we know if someone's coming in with a fake account. We know if someone says that they're in New York, but they're actually in Iran. I mean, so we can, you know, make sure that we have that protection in place. And then also we grew those forums into our patient registry. Now we have surveys attached to those forms because we've already vetted everyone in there. It all comes back on the back end. You know, we have a medical advisory board that has looked over the survey with us. We have a full team of security that make sure that everyone is safe. And so we have a one-stop shop in software that we adjusted and built pretty much from scratch over the past 15 years. And now we have moved our platform onto the same server that the WHO uses for pediatric surgeons. So we know that it's secure and safe. And then we can use blockchains to be able to use our data to talk to the surgeons and make sure that it is still private and that the patients own their own information and they can go in and update their medical information or delete it anytime they want. They always retain ownership. So no one is profiting off of their information at all. And we did this from scratch. We had no money to hire anyone. I had to learn how to code PHP, HTML, how to run an entire server. And that's what we did because it was needed. And so people want to be sociable and communicate, and that's fine. And we even have an option where they can log in through Facebook, but we cut off the amount of data that Facebook gets. So if they don't remember their login, their password for the forums, they can't come in through Facebook. So we tried to make it as convenient as possible for families, but also allow them their privacy. And, you know, we have photo albums on the forums. We have, you know, blogs that they can create and make private or personal. We wanted to keep everything in-house. Facebook has made that different. And now there's TikTok. And, you know, there's also Twitter and Instagram. And next year, there'll be 3 new platforms. And it's impossible to keep up with the privacy and the compliance from all these platforms and searching for patients and bringing it into one place. And everyone has their own opinion. And it's hurting cats. It really is. If you think you're going to get everyone on one platform or one place, we really can't. So we have to grow and evolve as social media does, but always have that one safe place that they can come to where they know without a doubt that our organization has their best interest, their privacy at heart, and we will never, ever profit from their medical information.
Wow. You came in before Facebook and then handle how Facebook kind of threw that whole dynamic, and just you're constantly adjusting. And I think that's like the nature of rare disease, is that you just learn how to keep adjusting, but maintaining the community's best interests always. That's the common denominator. Always maintaining the community's best interests at heart.
You have to, or organizations will split apart. You'll have different communities on different platforms and people won't collaborate together. And I have seen organizations who refuse to transition to new technology go under. They just disappear because someone else is always willing to do that. So you have to meet the demand of the people you serve and go where they are and make it accessible.
Thank you, Don. Lynn, do you have
Yeah. At a very low level, we have tried to do the same thing that Dawn has, but certainly not to the extent. And that is that we've listened to the community in terms of evolving our offer of a community on whatever platform we're on. And that's simply because in our case, we had been on Facebook for so many years and established so many different close support groups. And we began to hear from people that they didn't feel safe there. They didn't feel that what they had to say was still contained and private, and they wanted someplace where they could be more anonymous. So we took those comments to heart, and our needs evolved too. So we began to look across the digital platform space. And we came up with 3 things that we used to guide us as to our decision to expand our digital health community. Obviously, number 1 was anonymity for the patient and a level of protection. I bet it might not be the best, but some level of protection of the data and the stories that our community has to tell. And then the other thing for us is that the nature of our disease is an autoimmune muscle disease, very rare, but we have overlapping conditions with other diseases and conditions. So we wanted a space where we were not isolated as a myositis community, but could share support and information across other communities. So we were looking at a place where if I have dermatomyositis and I also have interstitial lung disease, that I could go to another site that might be able to give me more information on lung disease. Or if I have dysphasia, I could go to a site that had more information on swallowing and support there. So that's why we ended up with a community on Inspire. And as Dawn rightfully put it, we're always in an evolving situation. And for many reasons, we are always looking for something that might better suit us because we do want to protect our community as best we can.
Thank you, Dawn and Lynn, for the wealth of information that you both bring to the discussion. This next set of questions are actually directed towards Danielle and Kadeen as rare disease experienced professionals. So Danielle, speaking from the perspective of being a rare disease community-based person yourself, when seeking answers about your specific conditions online and connecting with others, how do you feel about industry members conducting social listening analysis on discussions that you have participated in?
I think there are some ethical challenges that are involved in the information that's being conveyed through social media research and social listening, specifically health-related information. We want integrity. We want confidentiality and privacy. We would like a level of protection and informed consent. Selling our information or our data that we're putting out there because we're unaware of the latest privacy updates, it limits us from actually being able to get the right data to the right places. But also, as we're putting our information on a public forum, where is that information going? Can anybody in the world view that information? Is that data going somewhere else and not towards what we're trying to accomplish in the rare disease community?
So as someone from the community, what concerns do you have about not knowing what happens to your data?
Not knowing what happens to the data makes me feel a little uneasy. I also feel like there's no resolve. As someone who has genetic rare diseases and would like answers, I feel like we don't get the answers that we're looking for, even though the data is being put out there. Research is being conducted, but I'm concerned that it's not going back into the community to help the people who it needs to be helping.
Thank you, Danielle. And Kadeen, the same question, being a community-based professional with a lived rare disease experience, how do you feel about industry's practice of social listening?
Because I do feel as though, coming from a rare disease community and being very private about my disease and not wanting to share with anyone but those that's in my community. And oftentimes I always wonder, like, you're using your Facebook and your Instagram or your TikToks or whatever other social media that you're utilizing to share what's going on with you and your body by going on Facebook Live or Instagram Live. And we don't know who is listening. We don't know, especially Facebook being a public platform, who can get that information. And so one of my biggest fears is you're sharing very private parts of your life on social media, and anyone can get to that, whether it's pharma or any part of industry. Your provider can see these messages that you're putting out there. And where does anonymity begin and start? And that in and of itself turns into, I'm sharing this with you so that you can get insight. And you're taking this part of my story or what I'm telling you, and you're gaining. And I'm not able to receive any of the compensation for that. So I always wonder, where does industry start to be mindful of that whole dynamic?
So as we all are aware, the discussion of data ownership has become amongst one of the more controversial topics being discussed today. Several digital health platforms are claiming that they allow the people to own their health data. But upon further exploration, the term ownership has been redefined in the digital world to mean that people only are being provided the opportunity to disclose their data distribution options as opposed to receiving some sort of meaningful compensation, like you mentioned, Kadeen. Danielle, as a community-based professional with lived rare disease experience, how would you define your preferred conditions of ownership when it comes to your health data?
Data ownership is having the legal title to your data. It's your information, it's yours. And then data stewardship is kind of what we've been doing. We've been providing the data. We're responsible for the data on a day-to-day basis, but we don't really own it. So what I would like to see as far as data ownership, especially in the medical community, I would like to see us move towards a way of acknowledging the people who are providing the data, perhaps through compensation or through allowing them to come talk on panels or being more involved in the community on a higher level. Because right now we just have the doctors and the big pharma and the researchers, and we don't really have everyone working together the way that we need to come together to actually truly get the right data. So for me, I'd like to have more safe places to discuss personal information or to get involved in communities like RAM, the Rare Advocacy Movement. I think it's really important that we have access to those communities and we can feel safe, because right now there's not a lot of that out there. So I appreciate you ladies for allowing us to have that, creating this safe place for us to come and share with each other our insights.
Thank you, Danielle. And same question, Kadeen, how would you define your preferred conditions of ownership when it comes to your health data?
Whenever a patient is freely expressing themselves, you're exposing or allowing an opportunity for anyone to take what you're saying and running with it and being vulnerable to not being compensated for the knowledge and wealth of information you're providing. We should, as community-based advocates, be able to be compensated for what knowledge we are sharing. But coming from a very vocal community where patients use their platform and their voices is to get the word out, because there's so much misconception and breaking down barriers that it becomes very difficult to appropriately do it, especially when patients pick up their phone, their device, and press play, and they're sharing very personal parts of their lives with the world. And as beautiful as that is, it becomes a very dangerous situation because you're exposing yourself to being taken advantage of, and you're allowing yourself to not be fairly compensated. And without an internet, it's there forever. And I don't feel like a lot of times patients know that or understand that. So it has to start with education and educating the community. They see you being so vulnerable. They don't feel like I have to pay you. They don't feel like I have to treat you with respect or treat you with any kind of value because you're being so exposed. You're allowing yourself to be exposed. It becomes a very delicate divide of what is ownership? Can I own this? And or can this person now take it from you because you put it out there for the world to know? So I do feel like patients need to be educated on what data mining is, what it is to own your knowledge. And I don't feel like patients understand that you're freely giving information that can be used by anyone in this space and in this community.
So you brought up a lot,
Mhm.
and you're pretty much saying an informed patient about this whole data dynamic and how easy it is to obtain this, now backing off on sharing, which is now going to create an alternative issue when it comes to the establishment of precision medicine, right?
Mhm.
And registries and collecting data to better natural history studies.
Mhm.
And so now it makes Lynn and Dawn's job even more vital because they are our protectors and our gatekeepers and the people that are making sure the agreements are in place. And then communicating to the informed advocates like yourself that this is actually a safe place to share. Do you think if a trusted leader in the space comes to you and says, look, we did this, and this. Like we lined it up and we made sure that this is a safe space. Your data will not be shared. There's no social listening allowed on this platform. You will never say something and then see an ad pop up for it on this platform. Would that ease your concerns about sharing?
I definitely feel like that would definitely help. My concerns, as you mentioned, are yes, I would love to see a gatekeeper say, hey, this is a platform that you can say whatever you need to say freely, and that level of confidentiality is maintained. Then, okay, fine. But you have any social media platform or whatever platform you decide to use to have all of the patients with this disease come together and talk about their experience without having to worry about whether or not a pharma company is listening, Google is listening, and now my personal and private information is out there for the world. So I would love to see that because right now that's not there.
Yeah, you bring up valid points. Now, I wanted to ask, what message would you give the industry or digital health platform developers as a community-focused advocacy professional?
To treat patients and patient groups with respect. We're not a gold mine that they can just pick away at and profit from. We're individuals. We're not a commodity. Patients are not a commodity. And we realize that you're a for-profit company and that everything you do is going to be based around making money. That's your prerogative. That's the free market, and that's a wonderful thing. However, our motives are very, very different, and that needs to be respected. We should be involved in everything and not treated as though we're just numbers on a data sheet that you can turn around and sell to make money, or a community that you can eavesdrop on to make money. But just have respect for the journeys of all these patients and for our data, and to know that that is our power. Once patients or communities of patients give up their data, we have given up the one piece of power that we have in research. That is our literal hope for any type of cure for the things that we are battling.
Thank you, Dawn. Lynn, you have a message.
I totally agree with what Donna said, and I'd like to give you a closing philosophy from our patient-centered research advisor, Manuel Lubnis, and that's that patients are not zebras in the wild to be observed and photographed in their habitat. They deserve a sanctuary where their conversations can be protected and their interactions can be occurring naturally without worrying about someone else using their suffering for marketing purposes. But I think that pretty much sums up how we would feel about it too. And it's really a reflection of what Dawn said.
Danielle, do you have a message as a community-based advocacy professional for the industry or digital health platform developers?
Dawn mentioned that we need to be respected as more than just numbers in the medical community, because that is often how we feel, like we're just being pushed on as another number and a piece of data. And then Lynn actually touched on patients not being animals in the wild, that our illnesses and our suffering and our struggles are being exploited for profit. And in the end of the day, we're not really receiving much of the benefit of that. At the end of the day, we still live with our illnesses. And at the end of the day, most of us are financially stressed because we put so much effort into trying to understand our illness. So I think community-based insights are imperative for us to be able to grow, and we need to adjust the way that the industry is going now, and we need to make it more patient-centric.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. Kadeen, you can bring it home with your final message.
We're already treated like commodities. Oftentimes, patients like myself feel like we share our stories and then our stories are then turned into marketing campaigns. We need to be more cognizant of, one, making sure that we are respected as patients. We are the ones that have the knowledge that you need to create your precision medicine, create your therapeutics, create your assets. And so be mindful and be respectful that when we do share our stories, don't use them and make them something that you checked off in a box. Once you lose trust, you're pretty much cut off from community. So be cognizant of that. Be mindful of the fact that you must always seek us out in order to create anything that you do. And so approach us with respect, approach us with making sure that you're mindful of what these patients have gone through. When the camera turns off, when the day is over, when your conversation with this individual from whatever company you're from ends, that person is still living with this condition. And that needs to be respected at all times.
Thanks, Kadeen. Yeah. When you're living rare is every day.
Every day, 365.
Can't really escape it. So unfortunately, we must bring this important discussion to a close for now. But as we all know, community-based discussions like these do not just take place at events like today's. And as Danielle just finished discussing at Presentation Place, community-based trust is at the core of being able to establish precision medicine protocols and standards of care, which is what makes these types of discussions so vital, as Kadeen has also pointed out on today's discussion. And with that, I would like to thank the World EPA Congress for hosting the very first community-based stakeholder collaboration zone. And I would like to thank all of you for joining us on Discussion Drive.